Good morning, everybody. How are y'all doing on Daylight Savings Day? We got up an hour early? All right, we're going to be in two places, Leviticus chapter 4 and Psalm 91. Leviticus chapter 4 and Psalm 91. Now, I'm 50, I turned 50 in December. So, I guess back in the 80s is when I first started kind of reading. I have been looking for the return of Jesus Christ my entire life. That's something that I've been looking at, studying, thinking about, praying about. That's what I've been looking, because I recognize that this time frame in the Bible called the latter days, the end of days, that's the time frame that we're in. And so that's something that I've earnestly studied and looked for and am excited about. But the other day I had the most horrible pain I can think of hit me. And I've actually gone through some painful episodes before because I have some scars. And it hit me about 3 o'clock in the morning. And it felt like somebody took a knife about that big and just stuck it in right here. And then just started twisting it. And didn't stop twisting it. Just kept twisting it. So it was very painful. Scale of 1. So when you get to the hospital, they'll ask you, how much pain are you in? And they assume that you can speak. And I could not speak. I was just, and I held up my hands like this. Because they say scale of 1 to 10, 10 being childbirth, 1 being very mild. How much pain are you in? And I was doing this. I couldn't talk. And so I got, they were trying to figure out what to do with me, and this is at Audie Murphy, the Veterans Hospital there in San Antonio, and none of the people came in, so they couldn't do a CT scan, they couldn't do any of this stuff until about 9 o'clock. They're really not prepared for emergencies like mine. So, it's 4 o'clock in the morning, it's 5 hours to anybody sit here. So they hit me with so much morphine that I just went to sleep for 5 hours. Shh. That's what they did to me. Shh. And I went to sleep, woke up, and they started doing everything and went through the tests, and they, all so far going pretty good. Why do I tell you that? A lot of times when you read the Bible and you start thinking about end of days or the latter days or stuff, and you look for those things, you can start to kind of to see things and you focus on it. And my point of that is this. While I was sitting there, I got to thinking, and the conclusion I came to is this. Every single person will see your end of days. Every single person will see your end of days. You will come to that day that is appointed unto you to die. And at that point, that's where I was at. I was like, I want to die right here. That was so bad. And everybody will come to that. So there's no point being afraid of it. Everybody has a day. You might as well walk around with a shirt with that date on it. That's your day. You're going to die on that day. You're going to go to be with the Lord, hopefully. I'm telling you all that because I'm about to talk about something that, and Carla told me, she says, please be careful before you start to talk about it. But I'm not going to be careful because I never am. I don't worry about that. Paul said, be careful for nothing, and everything by prayer and supplication. So I'm not making light of that. I'm going to talk about coronavirus. Everybody heard about coronavirus? Okay. Well, I'm going to test what you know. So I'm going to tell you what I know, because I've been watching it every day. And it's one of those things that I've been looking at. So what is a coronavirus? So a coronavirus is a ubiquitous virus. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. A cold, the common cold, is a coronavirus. Okay? The flu is a coronavirus. Every year there are about 60 different variations of flu that come out of China and come all the way across the world. When you get a flu shot, you've probably got the top 5 to 7 that they think you might get. And the reason the flu shot works is because we have what's called herd immunity, which means you've had the flu, you've had the flu, you've had the flu, and there are different versions. So every year you get that, it's a little bit different. That coronavirus is a little bit different. But because everybody's had it, you don't get it as bad, and but people still die from it. 18,000 people a year, 20,000 people a year still die from the flu. It's still knocked you out. In 1918, right after World War I, the Spanish flu, which was really the Chinese flu, swept across the globe, and 60 million people died. And here in the United States, what people did was they took their kids out of the cities and they sent them to live with their grandparents in the country to just get away from it. And it was pretty bad. We didn't really have the technology. We really didn't have the things to combat it. And so it killed a lot of people. Well, now all of a sudden you have something called COVID-19, which is a coronavirus. And there's a lot of stories about how it happened. And so what I'm going to talk to you about is just the best that I've been studying and that I've seen. So there is a laboratory in China in Wuhan, a city called Wuhan. It is a BSL level 4, where they study the most dangerous pathogens on Earth: smallpox, Ebola, this stuff. It looks like, from what I've read, a spy team stole this virus from Canada and took it all the way to China, and somehow it got out. Somehow it got out. That's one of the stories. There's another story that says it was intentionally done, which that's pretty evil. And then there are other stories about it. All we know at this point is the epicenter, the starting point, is Wuhan, China. And from there, it blew up. But at that point, we don't know anything. We've heard how many people get sick. We've seen we've heard how many people die, but we don't know the numbers are correct because we're dealing with China. And they have a reason to not tell anything. So it goes from one city of 10 million to another city, And China quarantines 10 to 20 cities, 700 million people. Now, to give you an idea of how big that is, in the United States, we have 3 to 350 million people. So that's twice the population of the United States under quarantine. They're welding people, welding doors so that they're in their buildings and they have to stay in their buildings. They can't come out. Streets are empty. There's videos of really just frightening things happening in China. And that's how they were dealing with it. All of a sudden, it's in Japan. It's in Korea. It's in Vietnam. It's in Italy. It's in France. It's in the United States. It's on cruise ships. It's at meetings. It's everywhere. Because a coronavirus is ubiquitous. It travels that way. Some people are dying. Some people are getting sick. And there's different thoughts on that. So the first one is, well, it's just like the flu. No, it's not just like the flu. If it was just like the flu, people would not be getting welded into their apartments, would they? You would not be quarantining 700 million people for the flu, would you? So that means the information is not correct. You're getting different information. So what are my thoughts on this? And these are my thoughts. They're not anything other than that. This is where I step into the land of be careful. If I look at the Bible, what does the Bible say about plagues? Where do plagues show up? Where's the first time we see a plague? Anybody know? First time we see a plague. 10 of them. Egypt. Egypt, that's right. So here's my question to you. Does God judge nations? Yes. Because he judges Egypt. Israel has been in Egypt, and they've been under slavery and oppression, and God says, going to judge this. 10 plagues. That's the reason for those plagues. Okay? Anytime you see a plague in the Bible, it is what? Judgment. It's judgment. Most times you see a plague in the Bible, it is judgment against a nation that is oppressing God's people. And so far, everybody with me? Okay, I'm not out in La La Land. Which nation on planet Earth is most responsible for oppressing and persecuting Christians at this point? China. I also want you to think about which nations on this planet are the largest users of abortion. China. They have a one-child policy. You get one kid. And so most times if someone, and they want a son to carry their name, so what happens if it's a girl? Abortion. You can look all of this up. I'm not making any of this up. Okay? Look at where it's hitting. It's hitting those nations. Okay? I also want you to understand, anytime a plague shows up in the Bible, it's usually judgment against nations or it's judgment against sin. And somebody can tell me different if you can find it. Point at the Bible. Right here in Leviticus 4, I want you to understand something. So most people in the church here in the United States think in terms of sin. They think in terms of what? My sin, right? I'm dealing with my sin. And what you see here in Leviticus 4, and I'm going to summarize and paraphrase, is first off, these are the sin offerings, and they have to do with the tabernacle and the priesthood. And God is giving instructions on how to deal with sin offerings. And so verse 5 through verse 12, that's what to do when a priest sins. Verse 13 through 21 is what to do when a congregation sins. And then later on, 22 through 25, that's what to do when a ruler sins. And then 27 on is when an individual sins. And here's my point. There are what? There are different kinds of sin. Do you think that's changed? Can a nation sin? Absolutely. When you go vote, when someone goes and votes and they vote for something that goes against God's principles and precepts, can that be sin for a nation? Absolutely. Can a congregation still sin? Absolutely. Can a ruler still sin? Absolutely. And God will deal with that. So here's some interesting facts about coronavirus. Number one, have you heard of any children dying? Yes? You have. Where? I haven't heard of any children dying. I haven't heard. As a matter of fact, what I've heard is the virus itself doesn't really affect kids that much. I find that interesting. It affects adults. It affects people that are compromised immune systems, but it affects adults. It doesn't really affect kids. I could be wrong, and if I was wrong, I would tell you I'm wrong. But, okay, all right, Lance, so what you've said is we've got a virus, and to the best of your knowledge, you feel like it's judgments against nations or judgments against sin. So what do we do with that? Well, what does the Bible say? Every time this happens, what God says is, turn to God. It's a message, guys. And the message is, turn to God. And that's the way you should read it. Turn to God. Do I know of its last days stuff? I don't know. Could be. Do I know how bad it's going to get? No. I can imagine, just like anybody else can. Am I buying A whole bunch of toilet paper? Well, yeah. Who wants to run out of toilet paper? Nobody. So I'll go fight at Costco for fun. That's what's happening in New York City. People are running and fighting over stuff. So what do we do with this? And here's my answer to you. Number one, wash your hands a lot. Number two, sanitizer doesn't work. Everybody hear me? Hand sanitizer does not work, and let me explain why. Washing your hands, soap is an emulsifier. And what it does is it wraps around the virus, and then when you wash your hands, it comes free. Okay? Hand sanitizer is alcohol-based, and it kills bacteria. Bacteria are not viruses. Bacteria is bacteria. A virus is a virus. Hand sanitizer does not work on viruses. Washing your hands works on everything. So much so that when you look in Leviticus and Exodus, where you get a lot of food safety laws, remember I said this is keeping 2 million people alive in the desert while they're camping, that God instructs them in any number of ways to wash themselves constantly. And that's how you keep people alive. So what should you be doing? Washing your hands. You can use hand sanitizer if it smells good and makes you feel good, but it's not going to do anything for the virus. Number two, Buddy was telling me this verse back there, Proverbs chapter 3, lean not on thine own understanding, or trust in the Lord, lean not in your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. But now I want to direct you to Psalm 91. Psalm 91 is called I call it the soldier's psalm. And this is a psalm that we pray over soldiers that are being deployed. And there are some promises in here. But the promise that I want you to get, before I talk about a promise, I want you to understand something about promises. Remember last week I talked about there's information, there's knowledge, there's understanding, and there's wisdom. Knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. So knowledge is the idea. The idea. So knowledge can exist by itself. Okay, so I can have a book about how to cook cinnamon rolls. And if it sits over there on that chair, does the knowledge exist on how to make the best cinnamon rolls in the world? Yes. Is it in my head? No, it's in the book. So that's knowledge. Knowledge exists whether I have it or not. So there are promises that exist in the Bible whether you've read them or not. Those promises still exist. They are your inheritance. They are for you. Now, if I read that book about how to make cinnamon rolls, the best cinnamon rolls in the world, delicious, tasty, smells good, fills up my house. Anybody getting hungry yet? If I read it and I understand it, I go, okay, there's the recipe, there's how to do it, there's pictures, it shows me how to do it. Now I have what's called understanding. I understand it. I've read it, I understand it. Now it's in my head, right? Does that mean I know how to make cinnamon rolls? Yeah, I know how to make cinnamon rolls. The book told me how to make cinnamon rolls. Looks pretty easy. I understand how to do it, but have I actually made a cinnamon roll? The answer is no. So I don't have any wisdom, do I? Because trust me, you'll start to get some wisdom about how to do something when you put your hands to it. So when I actually get the flour and the baking powder and the sugar and the salt and the eggs, and I get it out and I start doing it, and I try to roll the cinnamon roll and get the cinnamon sugar in there, and I'm kneading the dough, then I start to get what's called experiential wisdom. That's the wisdom of actually having done it. And then when I do it again, okay, when my wife and I were first married, she asked me, she goes, would you like me to make you some tortillas? And I was like, homemade tortillas, yes! And the first tortilla that she made me looked like the state of Texas. Isn't that true for everybody? And I said, I thought you were making tortillas. And she goes, well, it's the first time I've ever made them. But it looked like the state of Texas. It was lopsided, it's wrong, it was thick, looked like a cake. It wasn't rolled out right. Well, the next time, it got better, didn't it? And the next time, it got better, didn't it? Right. And I've been married 30 years, and that's the last time I ever got tortillas. Now we just go to Pachitas. We just go across town and we buy them. Okay? So when I start to make those cinnamon rolls, I start to get wisdom. But the next time I do it, I get more wisdom. And the next time I do it, and eventually it's like tying my shoes. How many of you really think about the bunny goes under, the bunny goes over, make a loop, tie the loops together? Do you do that? Or do you have muscle memory, right? All right. That's how God's promises work. That's how God's promises work. There's knowledge. There's God's promise. It exists over here. I haven't read it. I don't know about it. But then I come across it and I go, oh, look, there's a promise. Now I've got it in my head. And I start to understand it. And I start to think about it. But I haven't yet got wisdom, do I? Because I haven't believed it or had faith and said, I'm going to just trust you on this. Okay? And that's what has to happen. So here in Psalms 91, verse 10 and 11, there shall no evil befall thee, neither shall any plague come nigh thy dwelling. For he shall give his angels charge over thee, to keep thee in all thy ways. Does that sound like trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not unto your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your path? Does that also sound like commit your ways to the Lord? Yeah, it does. So I'm not just cherry picking a verse here, I'm pulling it out. Or cherry picking and pulling it out. So what do we do with that? You read your Bible, but at second, you now have a promise. And what does that promise say? That promise says there's no evil that will befall you, and no plague will come near your dwelling. Not in your dwelling, near your dwelling. And that he gives his angels charge over you. So what do I do with that? And you can choose what you want to do. I would never be so brash or forward to tell you what to do. But I can tell you what me and my house will do. I'm going to stand on that promise. And that promise says, no evil is going to befall me. And that no plague will come near my dwelling. And that God gives his angels charge over me. And I also understand over here what I told you about. Everybody has a day. Everybody has a day. You're not allowed to cough when I'm talking about coronavirus. You're not allowed to do that, sorry. Everybody has a day. And you have to keep that in mind. You have to balance these things out. But until that day, stand on that promise. Now, how do I do that? Say, Lance, well, how do I do that? Everybody say, how do I do that? How do I do that? Thank you, Lord. I believe your word. I believe your word is true. I receive your promise. And I thank you that you give your angels charge over me. I thank you that you will let no evil befall me. I believe your word, and I thank you that you will keep plagues from my dwelling. Make sense? Some little practical stuff there for you. So I'm going to leave you with that. Anybody have any questions before I close? Yes. Psalm 91. Psalm 91, verse 10 and 11. 10 and 11. Psalm 91, verse 10 and 11. Everybody got it?